You'll turn with me to the book of Numbers, chapter 13. Numbers chapter 13, starting in verse 17. I'm going to read all the way through 14 and verse 9. Here we have Moses and the children of Israel coming to the promised land. And Moses is ready to, God is ready to send them on in to take it. And we see some events going on. We see some people not trusting and obeying. We'll get into that a little bit more. Let me read, starting in verse 17. And Moses sent them to spy out the land of Canaan, and said unto them, Get you up this way southward, and go up into the mountain, and see the land what it is, and the people that dwelleth therein, and whether they be strong or weak, few or many, and what the land is that they dwell in, whether it be good or bad, and what cities they be that they dwell in, whether in tents or in strongholds, and what the land is, whether it be fat or lean, whether there be wood therein or not. And be ye of good courage, and bring of the fruit of the land. Now the time was the time of the first ripe grapes. So they went up and searched the land from the wilderness of Zin unto Rehob, as men come to Hamath. And they ascended by the south and came unto Hebron, where Ahiman, Shiziah, and Talmaiah, the children of Anak, were. Now Hebron was built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt. And there came unto the brook of Eshcol, and cut down from thence a branch with one cluster of grapes, and they bare it between two upon a staff. And they brought of the pomegranates and of the figs. The place was called the brook Eshcol, because of the cluster of grapes which the children of Israel cut down from thence. And they returned from searching of the land after 40 days. And they went and came to Moses and to Aaron and to all the congregation of the children of Israel unto the wilderness of Paran, to Kadesh, and brought back word unto them, and unto all the congregation, and showed them the fruit of the land. And they told him and said, We came unto the land whither thou sentest us, and surely it floweth with milk and honey, and this is the fruit of it. Nevertheless, the people be strong that dwell in the land, and the cities are walled and very great. And moreover, we saw the children of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the south, and the Hittites, and the Jebusites, and the Amorites dwell in the mountains, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea, and by the coast of Jordan. And Caleb stilled the people before Moses and said, Let us go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it. But the men that went up with him said, We be not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. And they brought up an evil report of the land which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, The land through which we have gone to search it is a land that eateth up the inhabitants thereof, and all the people that we saw in it are men of great stature. And there we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. And all the congregation lifted up their voice and cried, and the people wept that night. And all the children of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron, and the whole congregation said unto them, Would God that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would God we had died in this wilderness? And wherefore hath the Lord brought us unto this land, to fall by the sword, that our wives and our children should be of a prey? Were it not better for us to return into Egypt? And they said one to another, Let us make a captain, and let us return into Egypt. Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before all the assembly of the congregation of the children of Israel. And Joshua the son of Nun, and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, which were of them that searched the land, rent their clothes. And they spake unto all the company of the children of Israel, saying, The land which we passed through to search it is an exceeding good land. If the Lord delight in us, then he will bring us into this land, and give it us, a land which floweth with milk and honey. Only rebel not ye against the Lord, neither fear ye the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their defense is departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Fear them not. And we'll continue in verse 26. And the Lord spake unto Moses and unto Aaron, saying, How long shall I bear with this evil congregation which murmureth against me? I have heard the murmurings of the children of Israel, which they murmur against me. Say unto them, As truly as I live, saith the Lord, as ye have spoken in mine ears, so will I do to you. Your carcass shall fall in this wilderness, and all that were numbered of you, according to your whole number, from 20 years old and upward, which have murmured against me. Doubtless ye shall not come into the land, concerning which I swear to make you dwell therein, save Caleb the son of Jephunneh, and Joshua the son of Nun. But your little ones, which ye said should be a prey, them will I bring in, and they shall know the land which ye have despised. But as for you, your carcasses they shall fall in the wilderness. We read this story and we think about it in our own lives. How much do we want God to bless us? How much do we want to be blessed? And if we ask that question of ourselves, how much do we want God to bless us? Then we next have to ask ourselves another question. Well, then how far are we willing to go for God? How obedient are we willing to be? Here we have the congregation of Israel, and they're right at the cusp of the promised land. And they're ready to go. But Moses has 12 spies, one from each tribe, go in and look it out. Seek out the land. Spy out the land to see if it's fruitful. Spy on the inhabitants to see if they're few or many, weak or strong, if they're in tents or cities. And they're to come and report back. And after they come back 40 days later, you can just imagine the anticipation of all those. Each tribe has sent one person to go out and spy. You can imagine their anticipation waiting for their return these long 40 days. And when they come back, indeed they were told this would indeed be a land that God had promised, a land flowing with milk and honey, fertile and productive. But we had some problems in this story here. First of all, we need to look at a few things. What did they have before them? First, their opportunity. They had an extremely special opportunity put before them. The question was the land fertile and was it productive? Was it flowing with milk and honey the way God had described it? The answer, of course, was yes, yes, and yes. And they even brought back the evidence of it. They brought back, it said, one cluster of grapes. How many of you like to go to H-E-B and buy you, or Walmart and buy a cluster of grapes? You can usually hold it in a bag, right? But they brought back one cluster of grapes, so plentiful that they had to hang it from a staff and two of them carried it. This is how wonderful flowing the fruit was of this land. And you can only imagine how rich the pomegranates and the figs were that they brought also. What wonderful fruits that they had brought back to show how productive and fertile the land was. And all the congregation of Israel now had an opportunity. The opportunity they had been waiting for even years and years, many years, even before the deliverance out of Egypt. They had been promised that they would be given the land. And they're right at the cusp of this. Something that had been promised to their forefathers. A promise that was delayed by the bondage in Israel and in Egypt. But now it was time. Now was their day. And it was theirs for the taking because God had promised it to them. All they had to do was to go in and occupy the land. God had told them, I'm going to lay the path for you. I'm going to drive your enemies from your face. All they had to do was listen to what God had said, trust what He had said, and go in there. So what could possibly hinder them from taking advantage of such an awesome opportunity? What could possibly stand in their way of receiving the promises of God? Well, the next thing we look at is their outlook. They had an opportunity, but their outlook was small. After all this time, they had waited and waited for many, many years in waiting in bondage, and then all this time as they traveled across the wilderness as their exodus from Egypt, they had gone through thirst, they had gone through hunger, and God had brought them through all this. You'd think that nothing could stop them now after seeing God's protective hand in battles, God's protective hand in feeding them, God's protective hand in giving them water. What could possibly go wrong? It was their outlook. Their outlook was way too small. They came back and said, we're too small, we can't do this. You know, the Bible tells us that as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So where did they get their idea that they were grasshoppers? Said we were like grasshoppers in their sight. Well, if you think you can't do something, then you can't. If you think you're too small, then you are. If you think you're not talented enough, then you're not. If you think you're not smart enough, then you're not. If you think you're never going to get out of the bind that you're in, then you won't. Too many times, our underachievement is just simply because of our own underestimation of ourselves and our underestimation of the God who's behind us. So next we have their opposition. Oh yes, their opposition was strong. The people who dwelled there were a strong people, mighty people, giant in stature, it says. These were great men. And any attempt at doing the will of God, of moving forward by faith, is always going to be met by opposition in our lives. People are going to stand in our way when we want to do the will of God. Sometimes the opposition comes from the strangest places. Sometimes it's people we think should be on our side, stand in our way. But many times the world, this society, they're not all enthusiastic about the things of God too many times. And when you get enthusiastic about it, they're going to stand in your way. There are too many giants out there today trying to prevent you from coming unto Jesus. Giants of sin. Giants of society. Even some giants in our schools teaching our children some things that are contrary to the Bible. These are some giants in our world trying to prevent us from walking by faith, trying to prevent us from doing God's will. There will be great opposition. Any attempt of success in God is going to be met by giants. Some of the giants we face today, first of all, the giant of self. Sometimes our self gets in the way. We look at who got in the way of these people of Israel. Who got in their way? They got in their own way. A lot of self-doubt. Because they were trying to trust in themselves and not in God. They looked at what was before them, looked at their own self, and weighed themselves unable to withstand the opposition in front of them. They failed to realize that they had God on their side. The one person that gave them the most grief was themselves. They hadn't even attempted to try and fight the inhabitants there yet. They simply turned tail and ran. The next giant, the giant of sin. What was at the root of self-doubt? What was at the root of these people doubting themselves and keeping them from inheriting the promised land? What was keeping them from the victory? What was keeping them from what God had promised them? What was standing between them and God? Simply it was sin. the sin of unbelief. The worst possible sin ever. Christ, the one thing that's going to keep you out of heaven is unbelief in the Lord Jesus Christ. And these children of Israel, standing here at the cusp of the promised land, they had unbelief. They chose to believe the spies that said, you can't do this. Instead of believing in God who had told them, I will prepare this place for you. It's waiting for you. Unbelief robs too many Christians out of the joy of obedience to God. God's going to bless your life when you're obedient to His will. But unbelief, too many times, scares us away from following the path God has put before us. And that unbelief in believing that God's going to do what He's told us He will do prevents many of Christians from getting blessed. Prevents many a church from growing beyond its capacity because they don't believe that God is going to provide what that church needs. It's that wall that's put in front of us. Unbelief is a great giant wall set in front of us, preventing us from enjoying all the blessings that God has for us. And out of unbelief comes the giant of spinelessness, a lack of courage. These people here had no guts, as we like to say, no intestinal fortitude to go forward. They were paralyzed by fear. They said, we can't do it. If we try, we're going to fail. They're going to kill us all and take our women and children. They got all caught up in what they couldn't do instead of being focused on what God can do. And last, we have the giant of subversion. There was subversion going on there. God had promised the children of Israel a land flowing with milk and honey. But the devil was out there subverting little secrets, little whispers in their ears. You can't do this. They're bigger than you. They'll kill you all. And when those unbelieving spies, the 10 that listened to those whispers of Satan, they started to subvert Moses' leadership. You heard the children of Israel say, let us appoint us a captain to take us back to Egypt. Trying to subvert what it is that Moses had done and led them to. First they had rebelled against the leadership that God had placed over them in Moses. Then they essentially, in so doing, were rebelling against God Himself. They were standing at this report, and they were given a call for a decision whether or not they're going to move forward into the land of Canaan or not. When the spies were going in to see about the land, they weren't sent there to come back and tell the children of Israel whether or not they could do it. It was simply so they would know how to do it, how to proceed, not whether or not they could. It wasn't supposed to be a decision of whether or not they thought they could win the battle. It was simply a way to prepare, to be ready for the battle. And that was God's will for them. But that will was subverted by an unbelieving group of people. One group of these spies compared the giants to themselves, and immediately in their mind they were defeated. All the battles we talked about this Wednesday night with the youth group, all the battles of our lives are won and lost right up here. When you think you're defeated, you're defeated. You have to go in believing God on your side can win all your battles. And that's where they lost sight. They were defeated because they saw it in their own minds. They saw a people bigger than them, more giant than them, more heavily fortified than them. And they thought themselves not enough. They thought themselves grasshoppers. Now the second group, which only had 2 people in it, the second group of spies, instead of comparing the giants to themselves, they compared the giants to God. And there was no comparison. God was far exceeding anything that these giants could come. So in their mind, immediately they knew they were victorious. It didn't matter what was put in their path. They said, God is on our side, and God will be victorious. Now we fail to see was what they failed to see, but what was on their side and they failed to see it was the impotence. The sovereign reign of God was on their side. If they had allowed that to weigh into their decision, then it would have been a no-brainer. We move forward. We go on into the land of Canaan. But they didn't even think about that when they were trying to decide whether they should go in. They forgot all about the omnipotent God that was on their side. Though we may be grasshoppers, and our enemies may be giants, when God gives us great opportunities, God gives us the power to take them. God will give us the victory. Too many times we forget and we leave God out of the equation. Any time in your life when you feel like a grasshopper, you feel like your opposition is greater than you, don't ever feel that your God is too small. God is an all-powerful God. Too many times we read this Bible and we see all the mighty miracles and wonderful things that He's done, and we think, oh, that was in the past. No, it's still the same God. We still worship an all-powerful, almighty God. And if He's the one who leads us, if He wills us to do something, if it's in His will, there will be nothing that can get in the way of it happening. There won't be enough demons in hell, there won't be enough giants on earth to stop what God would have us to accomplish in our lives, as long as we're faithful to Him. So we see their outcome becomes sad. Their lack of faith, their loss to fear, their leaving off of the facts kept them from entering the promised land. They had gone through Egypt. They had endured those many years of hardship. They endured the flight out of Egypt, all the different trials along the way, the lack of water, the lack of food, the Amalekites trying to attack them from behind. They endured all these things, and they stand right on the verge of greatness. And they failed because they didn't believe, because they lacked faith. And because of that, they were condemned to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. And of all their men and women of age 20 and older that came out into the wilderness, only 2 got to enter into the promised land. Only 2. We're talking well over 1 million, close to probably 2 million people traveling with the children of Israel. Only 2 that started the journey finished it. What a sad story. Joshua and Caleb, the only 2 spies to have a positive outlook, to say, we can do this. The only 2 that wanted to go forward. The only 2 who believed and trusted what God had said, that this is your land. Take it. And as a result of their faith, they were the 2 that got to receive the promises of God. You know, God has struggles for us too. We're not faced with looking at a land and having to conquer it in battle. But we all have struggles in our lives. And in those struggles, we can find great victory. And we can find great blessing. Because God knows we need those struggles. We need those struggles to mold us and to make us more like Him. We think of a baby chick in an egg. And it grows. Through the process of growth inside that egg, eventually it outgrows that egg and it has to break out. But it has to peck its way out of that egg. It has to struggle and fight its way out. That struggle strengthens that baby chick and prepares it for its life once it becomes hatched. If that struggle gets cut short, if some unknowing child stumbles upon that egg and wants to help the baby chick out and breaks it open for it, that baby chick's not going to survive. Because it didn't gain the strength it needed to survive in this world. Now God will provide us with many opportunities. He's going to send a lot of opportunities our way. Many opportunities to get blessed. Many opportunities to do things in our lives. But in most cases, He's not just going to hand them over to us without some kind of effort on our part. We must struggle with faith. We must struggle with the work. We must persevere through the path that's laid before us. So great are our opportunities. And you ask yourself, what kind of giants are keeping you back from any opportunities coming your way? Are there giants in your way? What's keeping you from the victory? Do you feel like a grasshopper? Do you have feelings as if you can't do anything? If so, just remember God. And remember, He's omnipotent. Remember, He is all-powerful. Remember, He can handle the giants in our lives. And if we've got Him on our side, He will never fail us. So trust Him with your future. Believe His promises and take Him at His word. Let's stand and be dismissed in a word of prayer.